So this is going to be very short so that you can ask all the questions you might want to ask about it. I'm only going to take maybe about 8 minutes or so. Because a lot of you have heard this before. I recognize a lot of you have a lot of repeat customers or offenders or whatever you think your position is. But yeah, my name's Steve, and I want to talk to you about teaching debate in your class and why you might want to have a debate in your class. And if you want to have a debate in your class, how to set it up. Because I think that's the thing that people are most worried about, is creating some kind of cacophony or craziness where everyone's punching each other in the face in the spirit of MAGA or whatever. So, given... What?
You're just funny.
Given, let's see this. Why would you want to do this? Well, right now, the students are in a position where they're literally being assaulted by contradictory ideas. One is that our political discourse is toxic, and everyone hates each other, and everyone's shouting at each other, and we have to have endless debates that are horrific models of what debate should look like. And there's a history of this too. So these events are not proper debates, and they're not appropriate debates. They're media events designed to make money for everyone you see involved and everyone you don't see involved. CNN, Fox, everybody. I mean, there's a reason C-SPAN wasn't allowed to cover Democratic debates, because that cuts into the profit motives of MSNBC. So in this environment, I think that we should think about this in terms of, this is what our students see. When you say we're going to have a debate in class, this is what comes up into their head. Right? So this is our starting point. We have to be kind of honest about it. There's not a lot of respect for this. There's not a lot of, it's not a joyful thing. And all of us in here, I think, have kind of a commitment to communication. And that commitment involves the idea, in a very loose, I'm painting with the biggest brush I can possibly imagine, that having debates is healthy in a democracy. I think we can all agree. I mean, even that, though, you could debate. So why have students debate? Some reasons. An ethical responsibility. All of us in here have thought about this more than an 18 or 19-year-old has. And I think we have an ethical responsibility to kind of bring it up and say, why do you think it's not going so well? Maybe we should practice this. Right? Sheldon earlier talked about how he teaches a skill. I think that's great. I think when we move into debate, we're teaching a practice of being a democratic participant. And if it's a practice, it's something you have to practice. So the joke I always make is, you go to your dentist and you don't think anything of it, but they have a giant sign that says, dental practice. Now, I don't know about you, but I hope that my dentist is not practicing when I'm there. Right?
That's true.
But it doesn't mean that, right? Or legal practice. The lawyer's like, well, I'll give it another go. I'm pretty new at this. No, that's not what they mean. It means that it's an art. And as any good art, it requires continuous engagement where you're not doing it.
Right.
Continuous engagement or you're not doing it. And so I think that talking about what we do as a practice, essential for people who are supposedly participating in a democracy, in scare quotes, is essential. That was like a very legal phrase, I'm sorry about that. Modeling. We can model for them what we think this looks like, which is good. And there isn't a correct model. There's a model that you think is productive and beneficial and good. And I think it's incredibly healthy to share that model with the students. This is how we would discuss controversial issues. This is how we would learn about controversial issues, because debate is not about settling questions, but about opening them. So a wonderful way to learn about a topic is to have a debate on it. We'll get to that in a minute too. But modeling good practices that people who work or who live in a democracy or supposed democracy is scare quotes, is a good thing. Practice in free expression. We all talk about our right to free expression, but how often do we go to free expression practice? Like, we all have a right to play a piano, but I wouldn't want to hear you play it unless you have been practicing, right? Is that fair? I don't want to insult anyone. I mean, you might just be wonderful at banging on the keys. I mean, I'll just go listen to John Cage if that's what you're going to do.
Just Thelonious Monk.
Right, Thelonious Monk, that's fine too. But you have to practice it. You have the right to play guitar, but you better practice first. This is the way to think about this, I think. And practice in listening, which people don't think a lot about in debate. In fact, we don't have all those pictures I showed of our illustrious leaders who are flawless public speakers. I'm sure you admire each and every one of those people up there. They are not very good models of listening. But in order to do well in the debate, you have to listen. And I think this is one of the biggest frustrations about public speaking is, how do I teach listening? And debate's a wonderful way to do that, because their performance in their speech is going to be based on how well they heard the person who spoke prior to them. So let that sink in for a second. That's a really great thing to assess. I think that assessing that is important because what we have a lack of, I think, is listening. I think everyone's just kind of waiting for their turn to shout their MAGA or social justice warrior pre-prepared stuff. It's like constantly eating fast food is what public discourse feels like to me. I feel really excited and bloated and that I'm going to die in 20 minutes. Okay, so the curricular alignment. Jeremiah talked a little bit about this, but I think it's much more in a goal of sort of retention. But there's curricular alignment here, which is the question of grading versus assessment. So one of the things that's important for the university is assessing the students, which is different than grading. Grading is what kind of a quality assignment that they do for you. You assess the quality there. Assessment is when they're done with your class, what can they still do? And that's really important because that's the thing they're going to tell their family and friends about. That's what's the university experience. When I say, think about your university experience, you might think about a moment that just blew your mind where you're like, wow, I did this thing and I'm really proud of it. And I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I did this assignment or I did this paper. You might even still have it somewhere tucked away in some folder. You're like, I'm really proud of this paper. And then you go back and read it and you're like, oh, I think it's best left unread. But I'm really proud of that moment that occurred there, and we're going to put it in a glass box and figure it out. Research. This is something that we're really losing, I think, at the university, is research and how to navigate a library, a modern library, where most everything is on the website. And I think most of your students research by going to Google. They type in their topic, speech on marijuana legalization, and they go to the third link and click it, and they're like, word. Yeah, great, I'm going to crack up another beer. This research thing is easy. That's what they do. So you can contact the libraries, and they will send a librarian to your class on a schedule that you would like, and they can go over what resources are available. I do this every semester. I feel like I'm a real library whiz myself. But they always show me something cool, and it's good for the students too. And even if the students are like, I've heard this before, and you might have that vocal student who complains, we already did this in my English class or whatever. Say, well, it doesn't hurt to hear it again, and from a different librarian who has a different specialty. So I would highly recommend doing that instead of you telling them Google is bad. I hate to break it to you, you're going to be a persuasive drop in the ocean saying Google is everything. That's what you're going against. Google is life. Like, that's where everything is happening. So when you say Google is bad research, you sound like a crazy person. The librarian can help you make a better argument for that. Extemporaneous speaking. This is the kind of speaking that businesses and careers and organizations say they want to have people do, is to be able to, in a meeting, very clearly say, here's what I think is being discussed. We have these two options. Here are the advantages here. Here are the advantages here. Let's move the conversation forward. And that skill is appreciated by everybody in that interminable meeting. And I think that's a really, 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 really good thing. Not to say that we're interested in teaching people how to be business people, but we are teaching them about how to improve their lives, and I think getting an hour-long meeting down to 20 minutes is an improvement in everyone's life. Questioning. This is something that we don't teach anymore. I have this really old book from the 60s called Questioning Techniques, and I think it's hilarious, but it's also really kind of smart. It's like, here are the different kinds of questions. And here, why you would ask this kind of question versus this one. Here's an open-ended question. Here's a rhetorical question. Here's a closed question. Why would you ask these questions in this way? And it's something you explore with the students when you do a debate. It's kind of a fun thing to look at, research some of the pedagogy out there about it, and think about it. And then, of course, listening, which I already talked about a bit. How to listen, what to listen for, and how to fold in other people's comments into what you're saying, which I think is probably the most respectful thing you can do in a communication situation, to say, like so-and-so said, like Flora said, like Jeremy said, stuff that I've been doing actually. I'm modeling pretty well. Okay, so how do you put this together? First thing is you have to choose a topic. This is stressful. Donald Trump is the greatest president ever. No, I wouldn't do that. But what you can do is pick a controversy you're interested in. I always recommend going to this website, if you're short on controversies, called BioEdge. You might have heard me talk about this before, because I like BioEdge. Let me see if I can bring it up here. The internet is not cooperating. All the technology is turned against me today, as I know.
I have BioEdge fishing products.
No, that's not the right one. Although you could have.
fishing.
Although I will come to your class if you have a Bassmasters debate, I'm coming. You let me know. So here's BioEdge, and it's bioethics news out of
Oh, Ed got it.
Australian site, but they have amazing things to debate. Mostly it's about euthanasia, which every country in the world is deeply ingrained in a debate about how to legislate euthanasia, except for the United States, where I don't think we're having much of a medical ethics conversation outside of abortion, perhaps, maybe, is where it's happening. I don't really know. But the entire world is, and this really kind of opens up a lot of interesting topics for students to research. As you can see, these are like crazy things you would never experience, right? I mean, great topics, right? These are like things that are being debated globally. The one that my students were really horrified about that I did was in the Netherlands, it's legal for you to ask for physician-assisted suicide. The debate is at what age can you do this? And a court ruled that an 8-year-old girl could ask for physician-assisted suicide even though her parents objected. And the doctors did. Yeah, she had terminal leukemia. Now, that's a controversy. Now, if this is too hot for you, I know it's like, 10 in the morning, and I just gave you like habanero nachos here. You don't have to
It's late, it's 2 o'clock.
I know I've talked for way too long. You could just tell me that directly. That's fine. I'm not yet too. Look, you talked to me. But anyway, this is a good site. I have other ones too, but this is the one I always go to when I'm like, what kind of spicy thing could I have to give to my students? Yeah, do you like what you read? What's wrong with everybody? Okay, so if you don't like that, if you don't have something you're interested in, then look for things that are kind of close to home. I think marijuana decriminalization and legalization in New York is a hot topic that students would like. And it really doesn't matter what topic you pick, as long as it's not something that bores you or frustrates you as the instructor, because that'll affect your ability to grade them and your ability to assess them. Pick something that's actually interesting to you. You're going to have to listen to a lot about this. So I'd say pick something interesting to you that you feel that you could like Sherpa the students up that mountain, right? You could carry some of the gear and say, here's how we're going to approach this, and show them. And it's okay for you not to know everything about the topic. You can learn something cool too, so you might pick something you might want to learn about too. Beth, yeah?
So do you assign the topic to the debatees?
Sometimes.
Oh,
But
I thought maybe the debatees choose their own topic.
we're getting there. You already saw this.
No, this is a little new, but
Okay,
I was just curious if you
Yeah,
wanted
you
to
can do that
assign
too. I mean,
the
that's
topic.
kind of the kind of feeling I have. Like I said earlier, it's a potluck, so they should do a little work too. Like you shouldn't provide everything. You can provide the topic and have them do some kind of research burden, but also something with significance for the students' lives. I think the value of college, the value of the university, the job market. All these things are things like forgiving student debt is a big political issue. We have multiple Democratic candidates with multiple plans about how this should be done. And this is something worth, they might already be excited about it. So when I, thinking about what students bring into the classroom, a level of excitement about issues they care about might be really, really good to tap into and get them excited to give speeches so that you don't get bored and hear the same things. Yes?
So would you grade them the same way you grade the speeches, like with the same rubric, or would you pull up with a different rubric?
Yeah, I have rubrics that I do a different one every time because it's based on what I'm trying to push them into doing. So the students respond exceptionally well to grading without thinking a lot about it. They just kind of jump, like it's like the sign of the master. Like jump, and they're like, how many meters to the 10th place? Like they want to know precisely. So I'll do a different rubric based on what I'm teaching. One of the suggestions I might have is do this later in the semester as a way to sort of push on the things you think your class is weak on. So if they're very bad at introductions, you could make the introductions a very heavy part of this and say the introduction should include what your opponents have said, include some research, however you want to structure it. Because in the end, the grade is not important. What's important is the reinforcement of a pattern of practice that they'll carry with them to the next class. I mean, one of the old ways of defending public speaking in the university is to say it's a service course for every other class they'll take. So if other professors have them give a presentation, what would you want them to have in their back pocket, quick reference, that you kind of drilled into them, through this kind of classical conditioning of grades. In the end, I think you should always be kind of designing a different rubric based on how the class is going. Like I'm always changing it because I'm like, wow, they're not really good at developing their points. So I'm gonna make that worth like a lot of points, and then suddenly they're good at it. So he just kind of pushes it that way. So, but yeah, you can make the students choose a topic. And these are some questions you could ask them to try to get them to think about what topic. You say, hey, we're going to have a debate. They immediately think of that landfill image. They're like, oh God. They're like, what kind of thing would you like to talk about? What's something going on in the world you wish you understood better? What's something people argue about that you don't understand why they're arguing about it? This is really eye-opening when you get the students' trust. The things they say, they're like, I don't understand why we're arguing about the Supreme Court. Like, what do they do? And it's like, whoa, okay, we got to have a little chat. But this is all, politically and culturally, we've gutted high school civics. So it's no surprise that they wouldn't know what the Supreme Court does. I had a great discussion with them. They didn't know what the Attorney General did. We were talking about Jeff Sessions, and I did sanctuary cities last year, because that was a hot topic. And I was like, so should New York be a sanctuary city? Let's watch a speech by Mayor de Blasio. Let's watch a speech by Jeff Sessions. Like, who is this? So this one girl was like, who is this guy? I was like, oh, he's the Attorney General. She's like, okay. Well, yeah, what's the Attorney General? It's like, oh, they're the lawyer for the government of the United States. Oh, does that mean that they represent the United States in court? And, well, someone from their office, but they direct what that representation looks like. She's like, do we have any other ones? I thought that was pretty good. So it was kind of an eye-opening experience for them about the incredibly low quality of our public leaders. What is something people argue about you don't understand? And what issues do you think someone should know more about? So a lot of our students, and Gen Y students are really funny about this, is they're really into awareness. You probably heard this, like, I'm raising awareness. I want awareness. Why do we never talk about X? This is like a trope that you hear young people use all the time. We never have an honest conversation about X. Those people don't feel seen. These are the tropes of the young, right? The youthful discourse of Gen Y. So this is one where they'll probably want to talk about human trafficking, because that's what all mine always want to talk about. And that's fine. As long as they're engaged, and as long as you can use it to teach folks people, it's great. Now, this might still be too spicy for you, so we'll lower the spice level. Oh wait, I put this in here. So here's some different ways to phrase it. Once you have your topic, phrase the topic as a statement. Don't do it as a question. So if the class wants to talk about climate change, what's the best thing to do about global climate change? It's going to end up with a cacophony and people talking past each other. And this is what you see in our televised debates. What's your plan for immigration? And everyone just kind of talks and says their own thing and they don't interact. And it's very unsatisfying. It's like eating a can of frosting. It seems like a good idea at the time, but very unsatisfying. Not that I've done that, don't get the wrong. All these topics address that question, but what's cool about these topics is they punt the power to the students of what it is they might want to talk about. If you want to have the nuclear energy debate, which I think is a really underrated debate, so really cool to talk about nuclear reactors, especially now that Fukushima's out of the headlines. We might not be surprised to see Germany and France start their reactors back up. That might be a good one to talk about. International agreements, the best way to address China. This is your Paris Accord debate, if you wanted to have that. Electric cars, this is a good one because everyone's thinking about cool Tesla and cool Elon Musk smoking weed on Joe Rogan's podcast. Okay, so always make it a statement, not a question, okay? Topics don't need to be political. Here's a good one, right? Like I said, the students are like, we want to talk about music. So here's just a topic I came up with. Spotify's a terrible way to access music. And I thought about this because Tool just released the album on Spotify. I never thought they'd do that because they always said the album art is so important and they experience the album, and then they were like, but we like to get paid. Film. Tarantino's an overrated director. But I mean, this could easily become a political topic, right? Yep. He's a sexist, he's misogynist, whatever. Art. Museums are no longer necessary for artists. Do something like that. You like that one? No. Something like, just take from whatever, your experiences are valid too as an instructor. Take from those and you can come up with a pretty good topic that the students might like. Okay, so the rules. All you need for basic rules to have a debate in your class are two sides, one in support, one against the topic. So one side says the topic is true or good, and one says the topic has problems or it's bad. Then you need to figure out time limits. That's really kind of a technical question of how much of your semester do you want to spend doing this? How many class days? How many graded assignments do you want to pull out of it? And kind of do the math and figure out how you'd like to do it. Some people will just do one class and divide the class in half and have people give 1-minute speeches. Some people will do rolling debates of 4 people teams across weeks. It's really up to you and what you're comfortable with in terms of how much class time do you want to dedicate to it. And I can help you with the specifics of that if you want to reach out to me. And then, how do you want the questions to go? Do you want to be able to ask the questions? Do you want them to question each other? Do you want the audience to question them? There's a pretty good model where you can have 3 students as kind of the panel of judges, and they're the only ones allowed to ask questions of the 2 sides. So that gets more and more people involved. So you might have 2 debaters, panel of 3 judges. It's kind of like an appellate court, where they're making their argument, and the judges can kind of interrupt and say, but what about this, or what about that? And there's some pretty good models on C-SPAN of appellate court that you can listen to the audio of and how that works, and you can have the students listen to that and say, do you think this would be cool to do? And they may be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. So it sounds really cool when the federal judges do it. Anyway, these are the things to think about. Okay, so assessment. Here are the things that you can grade and you can assess. You can grade their preparation. You can have them turn in a bibliography. You can have them turn in a short paper of the things that they've read. All of this can be graded. Think multimodal. All the different things we're grading. Research, writing, teamwork, whatever it is you want to do. You can grade their speaking attempts. I always say that because there are a lot of students who are kind of reticent about public speaking, and debate is like a horrifying new level of, like if I'm scared of like roller coasters, I probably am not going to want to get on the space shuttle. And this is what it feels like to them, right? So you want to diminish that and say, well, these are just attempts. I'm going to grade how well you attempted that. And they also will say, oh, that person's so much better than me, I'm going to get an F. You say, well, no, I'm not grading you against other people, I'll grade you against yourself. And what I think you're capable of, and I think I can make you better, right? So you might consider doing maybe redo speeches. I like reiteration. So maybe having them do the speech over again as an additional grade might reduce the panic level a little bit. So that way they don't feel like they're going to fail out. You can grade interaction. How well did they question each other? How well did they bring in the arguments of the other side into their speech? And you can grade attention to the topic. Did they go off the topic into something weird, or did they keep focus on what the question was? And in a teaching argumentation class in the spring, they loved to just run from the topic. It was the weirdest thing. And I'm like, where are they learning this behavior? And I'm like, oh, they're learning this behavior from the news cycle. Because a repetitious news cycle means you change the channel. But if we run from the topic and we go this way, you're going to stay on CNN all day, right? On mute in your doctor's office as you wait, because they're only an hour behind you or whatever. Okay. Other things to consider. Feedback forms. Having the audience, the other students watching the debate, fill out something. You can even have them write a paper or give a speech about the debate as an extra assignment you could do for them. Who do they think won and why? Posting in a discussion forum on Blackboard. All students who all have Blackboard, course management, you can open a discussion forum there and have them all post a question and a response about the debate with each other outside of class. And that can be something you could grade as well. Talking about questioning techniques. And listening. Filling out a ballot or a feedback form. We have these judging these debate ballots that look very official. I can give you a copy of them. You have to fill those out in class and collect them at the end of the class. Very simple way to grade or keep students attentive, keep students attending the class, coming in, all those mechanical concerns. Holding a discussion about the topic in the next class. So one of the values of debate is it's a shared text. Students won't do the reading, but they'll remember a debate. And they'll remember a debate their peers were in. In the next class you can say, okay, let's talk about that debate we all watched. Let's get out your notes. What did you think was good about it now you've reflected on it for a day or so? That's always kind of fun. And then writing up an opinion or giving a spoken response. You could have them like film themselves on their phone, post it to Blackboard, their own kind of spoken response, whatever you want them to do. They can put it on YouTube or whatever. There's a lot of options now to try to get them to respond to it. So, other questions that I don't have easy answers to here at the end of this presentation is, what's the appropriate amount of research to engage in a debate? And this is an open research question. The spectrum is 0 research. Let's just debate and figure out that we don't know what we think we know. Or have them do this huge copious amount of research before they get into debate. So this is debate as genesis of knowledge versus debate as the packaging of knowledge generated elsewhere. And somewhere on that scale your assignment will sit, and that's something you have to be comfortable with. What counts as evidence? This is a huge, in case you didn't know, we live in the post-fact, alternative fact world, right? Thanks to President Trump and his friends. Post-fact society is a fascinating thing to think about. This raises the question of evidence. And a lot of people have scrambled towards medical and scientific evidence as the litmus test of evidence. But scientific evidence doesn't help us determine how much money to put into Social Security or how many troops to have or things like that. So it's a really kind of a very shallow and very kind of a poverty of evidence is what scientific evidence is. But the students will have watched Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, and they'll think scientific evidence is the gold standard of evidence. But we need to broaden this into a conception of proof. So this is an open discussion to have, is like, what does it mean when someone has evidence for something? What does that mean? We also have the Me Too era. Time's Up. All of this is happening at once, and it's raising questions about evidence and what is good evidence. And that's a live conversation that you can get into with the students, which is great for a class like ours. How much time for debate? I don't know how to answer this for you. How many classes do you want to dedicate to getting ready for it? How many classes do you want to dedicate for them speaking? It's something you really think about, because if you do it, it might grow like the blob and just eat your whole semester. So you want to kind of plan ahead of that. And then what about reticent students? How do you deal with students who are just like, I cannot do this? And that's something you have to think about, the student who's really kind of like anxiety riddled. We have to deal with, like Michael was saying, we have to deal with mental health concerns, social anxiety, and these are very real things. We have a student say, I am on anti-anxiety medication, I cannot do this. So what's your response going to be for that?
Bring in a note.
Bring it in. I mean, there is a technical kind of, but also how to get them, because bringing in a note isn't going to help them in a situation where they have to advocate for their kids in the PTA.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking of, right? So how do we adjust? I mean, obviously we need to do that, but what's the way we're going to handle that? So these are open questions I give to you as kind of the end of this thing. So thanks for your attention. I'm happy to answer anything you might have. Sheldon.
The last one, other questions. What about reticent students? My experience is that a lot of students are frightened
Yeah.
when they have a step to the lectern. There's only one way to overcome that bashfulness, and that's practice.
Yeah, that's right.
Practice again and again and again and again, and what will happen is you're no longer bashful.
And I know that you meet one-on-one with students.
I meet one-on-one. If a student is not responding in class, because there are other students there who have to be.
Right.
I meet them one-on-one, a half hour, face-to-face, and in that time, I get them up there and they speak again and again and again until they get it right.
Yeah.
And that's how you overcome bashfulness.
Yeah, I think the fear, the reticence comes from unfamiliarity.
Yeah, it is unfamiliar, of course.
But it gets read by the student as, I'm a failure. So lots of people like to prejudge, like, I can't do it because I've already been bad at it, even though I've never done it before. And this is also the discourse of the university in a weird way. Like, we're trying to get students to come here by telling them, here's what you're good at, do what you're good at. That's not the point of the university. Learn something is the point of the university. Like, come here because you're bad. It's a school. You're not supposed to know things. And I think they get stressed out. They're like, I'm not going to take that class because I'm not good at it. What? Like, yes, you're not good at it. That's why you're in the class. That's why you're in class. Like, if you were already good at public speaking, you wouldn't be here. You know? So, or math, or whatever class it is. It's so funny they think like that. I don't know where that comes from. I think it comes from like, well, you're already good at that, so you should do that as a career.
It comes from maintaining their GPA.
Yeah, but where does that come from? You know, it's like, it's such a fake, it's faker than, anything.
Well, that's why it's good that public speaking is required.
Yeah, I think so. And it's good that we have, and so a core curriculum as a whole, it's good that we have that too, because the students in the high schools are not being exposed to what we had in the high school. It's gotten thinner and thinner and thinner, and more numbers and more tests and exams, and it makes people who aren't there very comfortable about saying what students are able to do and not able to do. But the students are just like, I can follow directions. I mean, I can be a good soldier. That's pretty much what you get. So, exploring something unfamiliar to them, they're going to push back. And so you need to think ahead before that day happens. Think what your response is going to be to help those reticent students out, and have a plan in place before you announce that you're going to do a debate. So you might have some people push back.
I think it's also important to ask them why they're reticent,
Mm-hmm.
rather than assume that it's just public speaking anxiety. Because I know, English is my third language, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes when I have to speak, I learn English by reading,
Yep.
not by listening. So sometimes I still mispronounce things, and there used to be a time when I was an undergrad and stuff when I would just freeze up
Yeah.
because I mispronounced something, and I'm like, oh my god, I just outed myself as an outsider now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made me reticent. Not that I felt like I wouldn't do a good job, but
Yeah.
it's just the having to feel like, oh, everybody just found out that
Right.
I'm not from the US.
Oh, that's good,
Kinda
that's
like
happened
just-
before.
Yeah, so I think it's important to ask why.
Yep.
And then see what the answer is. Sometimes they'll tell you, and
Yeah.
sometimes they won't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've had a lot of different reasons for it when I kind of like, why don't you ever come and speak? So it is good to ask, you're right. I
I
agree.
usually have them, oh, I'm sorry, I usually have them sit in a circle of the first class, with name tags in front of them. I think we went over this a few years ago in one of these meetings. And, we all talk about what makes us most fearful about
Yeah.
public speaking openly.
That's very good.
And there's, when they realize they're not alone in those fears, you know, whether it's stumbling over a word or looking foolish or worrying everyone's looking at me, then we discuss it together, you know, and they feel more comfortable with that particular audience at least,
Mhm.
because they understand that there's some kind of affinity there.
Yeah.
They get me, wow, they feel the same way, I didn't know that, other people thought that, you know.
Yeah, I think that's
That
great. I
does
think,
help.
yeah,
It
no,
does
yeah,
help.
I think anything that lowers the stakes, stake lowering is really important.
And increases a feeling of community in the classroom,
Yeah.
you know, like where I'm like, everybody's
Exactly.
pulling for you, nobody's wanting you to fail.
Yeah,
Everyone's on your side, we're all with you, so that really helps.
That's why without even having a cultural speech here, I did teach it somewhere else, very often students will surprise me in the intro speeches. I had a student here 2 semesters ago who got up and said, you probably don't know it to look at me, but I'm often referred to as a Twinkie. I had never heard that term myself, so I learned from them as well.
Yeah.
And she said, let me tell you what that means. And she went on to say that her parents are the ones that call her a Twinkie, meaning that what it comes from is allegedly yellow on the outside because she was, her parents were from China, she wasn't, she was white, and white inside. And she told us how it felt to kind of lose an identity, you know, that she was being disparaged by her own parents because she wasn't Chinese enough, even though, so it really opens up a great discussion in the classroom, and she shared with me after that she felt better that she, you know, kind of let it out there and let other people see that, you know, kind of, you know, tentative side of herself. I had never heard that phrase before, it was a first for me.
I learn amazing English every day from the students, pretty much. They tell me some weird phrase.
Oh, that's true too, yes. Not to mention slang.
Triggered, you get that in the back of the room. Triggered, that's something they do.
Canceled.
Canceled, cancel culture, this is
Nobody,
interesting.
yeah, the canceling, but we
There's not a lot of discourse of redemption out there in public speech. It's like, you do one thing wrong, you're canceled. That's the way the students feel.
Do you feel like it would work out if we just had that as part of their participation grade? So it lowers the anxiety of like, oh my God, if I don't get this right, I'm gonna get a 0. Instead, it's like you participate and you're getting your participation points.
Yeah.
Regardless of, or does that mean that some students will show up with a lot of preparation and some students will show up like, oh, well, you know, let's just wing it.
Yeah.
It's just participation.
You will get that. But what's great is this wonderful thing of public shame that you don't have to do anything about, which is if they go and argue with somebody who's done a lot of preparation, they think, wow, they really
Yeah.
schooled me. What did I do wrong? I was like, well, you wrote down, like with a tube of lipstick on a cocktail napkin on the Q46 on your way here, you wrote down your arguments. That's not gonna fly, right? So, you gotta really like do a little bit more than that, you know? And so they'll be like, oh wow, and so that you get that kind of weird communal competition, I like to call it, where the people want to raise the stakes and be at least, and it's something weird about, you know, how we are.
And say the
They'll
things.
want to say something better. They're like, oh, I don't like what they said, but I don't know why. Kind of thing, and that's great. But I think the participation thing is a great way to do it. When I do this talk for other parts of the university, they're obviously not teaching public speaking, they're teaching something like biology or sociology or math or something. And I say, one of the best things to do is take a reading that you assign that's usually boring, but you feel obligated to assign it, because it's canonical, it's an important part of your field, and pretend as if it's controversial. Give it to them and say, okay, this is a controversial position, do you agree with it or not, and make a case. And so it's a better way of doing a reading discussion where everyone just kind of goes, I liked it. Like, what did you think of the reading? It's good. Did you do it? Yeah, it's good. I think it's good reading. And someone else will be like, I liked it. So that's one of the ways you can make that happen a lot better. Is you can say, you just lie to them and say, this is a huge controversy, and this is hot off the press, and they feel involved in something. Which is, you know, they'll read the piece and they'll be like, but this piece means this is, you know.
I'll talk to you later. I
Sure.
have 2 class periods set aside for group work right before a persuasive speech, where I want to bring in like organizational patterns and practice and like make groups of people so that they're like learning concepts and at the same time practicing what Monroe's motivation looks like as
Yep.
opposed to problem solution kind of, so I'll talk to you about that.
Yeah, that sounds
How to
great.
set it up.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, thank you everyone, thank you Steve. 10:30, we're pushing up against the new student commendation. Thank you everyone for attending today. Hopefully there's something that you can use for your class for student engagement.